In 1959, at Street's Grocery in Whitefish, Montana's special spice was born. Alpine Touch. It's the taste you grew up with, well seasoned through the test of time. As the tradition carries from one Montana generation to the next. From its humble beginnings to a trusted brand, here's to the next 60 years. Alpine Touch. Montana's special spice since 1959.
I think after reviewing the film, really pleased with the way we started that game, that first quarter. You couldn't write it up much better than that. Now, it wasn't perfect from then on, but we got the turnover and the score before the half, took that 20-point lead, and then second half wise again wasn't perfect by any means, but we were able to play a bunch of players, keep them off the scoreboard, and put a few more points up ourselves. So, liked our balance on offense, to say the least, and defensively we continue to make it hard for teams to run the football. And if we can continue to do that, we'll be doing the things we want to. So I'll open up for questions.
What were some of the things that you would have liked to have improved the most on?
Well, I think offensively, I do think there were some second level blocks that we could have finished better, and I think that's with our backs, that's just going to continue to be an emphasis, whether that's our linemen, our tight ends, or receivers downfield. I think in the pass game, there were certainly a few things we left out there. I think defensively, it was really that one drive that they had in the second quarter where, we just didn't execute maybe as well as we'd like. But, I think the biggest thing I look at is special teams wise. We got flagged a whole bunch, didn't handle 2 punts, kicked the ball out of bounds. So we got certainly room to grow on the special team side as well.
And you, after the Willie muff, the second one, I think you went up to him. Was it just as simple as, hey, we can't have that, or was there another?
Oh, I think he really took that hard. I think he's been in and out of that position, and he knew he put the defense in a tough spot. He put the team in a tough spot, and he's a competitor. And I just told him, you got to move on to the next play, and whatever that play is going to be. And for him, that was more than likely going to be an offensive play. So just pick your head up and move on was the message to him.
Are you pretty scared for him on the one where he got hit?
Yeah, there's a real fine line there, and we'll see the response that I get from the Big Sky officials. But the tough, dangerous play, and unfortunately it was really just a wind getting knocked out of them. But you got to be fearless back there, but they should also be very protected, and that was not the case on that play.
With the Big Sky officials, were you specifically?
Well, I just as a head coach that's coached on offense and hasn't paid attention to all those rules relative to that type of play, where is that line where it's more than just a personal foul? I guess that's my question. And if there isn't a line, then that's okay. Just a further understanding, I guess. And
with the other flag too, is there some concern that guys might take a free shot there almost? I don't know if that's what happened there, but
I don't want to accuse them of that, but yeah, we had a hold on that same defender on that play, and I don't think it was that, but you want your guys to feel like they're protected back there. That's the way the rules are written up, and obviously Willie took a tough shot in that play.
You mentioned how well you've been defending the run, especially with the new defensive scheme for players who have been here before. What do you like about the scheme as far as when it pertains to defending the run?
Well, it's very principled. It gives us options to, for movement, for pressure, that can aid in the run in the pass game. I think we've been able to utilize a variety through our first 5 games, and I think our guys have played really assignment sound. And when we're assignment sound, we should be +1 numbers wise, and we've tackled really well. And our guys, I think, more and more understanding leverage and trusting their teammates, and that's been the really nice thing to see going all the way back to our first scrimmage back in the spring. That trust, that understanding of leverage was far from what it is today, and we've made huge strides as I think about where we were at back in April.
And there's been times that big nickel position that Ty Okada's been playing, it was a linebacker during fall camp, and it's mostly been a defensive back. And how impressive or how happy are you that you've been able to defend the run with 5 defensive backs in most of the time?
Well, I think that's a testament to Ty's ability, and we added Trey, and that gave us the flexibility to put Ty over there on the other side, and Ty might not be by stature this guy that is physically opposing, but he's probably as good a tackler as we have, and he's been able to tackle well. He's been able to make quick reads, see things fast. So the number of times that he's been in the backfield and made those plays, it seems like it's an every week deal. And Ty has really allowed us to play the defense like we want to.
Eric Zambrano getting the interception. What have you thought of his performance up until this point through the season?
Eric's been improving, and I think, you look at Eric, he's got really good size for a corner, and at times he hasn't maybe utilized that from a physicality perspective, and that was one thing that he was challenged with coming off the Portland State game, and he really did a good job. Beyond that interception, he was really very consistent at the line of scrimmage, whether we were in a man call or a zone call, because that's got to be his strength, his calling card. He can run fine, but his physical nature has to be a big part of what he does, and he tackled well on Saturday as well. Besides the big play, there was a complete game for him, and probably his most complete performance at this point.
And what did you see from him on that interception? Out of pretty good play.
Well, really athletic play. Now the guy was behind him, and it was a scramble situation. I know that wasn't as big a part of McCaffrey's game as it was the previous week in Alexander, but he was able to recover with a really athletic play, and I think it was still a play we could teach off to say, you really in that situation can't let this guy get behind you, but great catch, and then our guys being able to flip into return mode, and make a convoy essentially for Eric as he went down the sideline, so we could flip the field and not only get the turnover, but flip the field and get into their territory and ultimately turn that into a score.
Personality-wise, how does he fit into the kind of the team dynamic out the field?
Eric's he's a little more quiet maybe than some of our guys, but I think he's a competitive guy, and that's just certainly displayed on game days. But I think he's become much more consistent in the way he goes about his business. He played as a true freshman, and then you have 2020, so that growth that typically happens from one year to the next probably wasn't quite the same, but really appreciate how he's responded this fall, and honestly responding to a situation where the depth has kind of been flipped upside down a little bit with Tyrell missing time, and now James, going to miss some time, and he's emerged as a guy that we can count on. I think that's the biggest thing I've seen out of Eric.
How much time do you expect James to miss at this point?
He gets reevaluated next week, so hard to say right now. I know it'll be a few games, which last week, this week, and then he gets reevaluated, and we'll see where it'll be. But it'll probably be a little bit longer than we like. But fortunately, we've had guys step it up, and I think Simeon and Eric have played pretty steady, and Tyrell, I know it's been a week-by-week deal. He's been there from an emergency perspective the last couple of years, but we do expect him to take some game reps this week.
And how's the depth kind of look behind Simeon and Eric right now?
I think Miles Jackson is a young guy that has flashed at times. He's really only been asked to play in late game situations, but he would be in there as far as a guy that we could go to. Devin Davis is another young player that's continuing to improve, that really takes his role seriously. He's bouncing back and forth between the scout team and being up with the defense. So appreciate Devin's willingness to continue to improve. So I think it's solid, but I think guys like Miles and Devin need to keep coming to say it's exactly where we want it to be.
Early in the week, but anything worth noting about Cal Poly?
Well, I think the first thing you look at is okay, the record is what it is. We have one common opponent in San Diego. Their losses, they've played pretty good teams. They've played a pretty good schedule at this point. And, much like Northern Colorado, it's a situation where Coach Baldwin took over at the beginning of 2020, didn't get that, or didn't get that year. I know they played a few games in the spring, but didn't get that year like he typically would have. So they're still finding themselves. I mean, Cal Poly to me had been a real consistent program. When I was at North Dakota State, we played them and had some real dragouts going back, and that's a while back, but had been a real consistent program that could recruit good athletes, very smart athletes, and I know they're a team that, because of all of that, is very dangerous. And their record, I don't think, indicates where they are, maybe where they could go.
When you faced them at NDSU, they were triple option back then? I imagine?
Yeah, triple option flex defense. So unique schemes, and that's probably the one thing that you immediately notice. They're not that anymore. They're not the unique scheme on offense or defense at this point, and that's a transition, especially on the offensive side that they've made, and I'm certain they're still in the midst of that transitioning from a recruiting perspective, but then also a developmental perspective of just how their athletes are geared towards a completely different mindset on offense.
Freddie, you mentioned the 5 quarterbacks they run out there. How tough or annoying is that to prepare for?
Well, I think it's a challenge because anytime you have that kind of number, they're all a little bit different. How you defend them, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. I know, Spencer Brosh was a name that I was familiar with that we'd recruited, tried to recruit out of Arizona to Wyoming, and he got Pac-12 attention and offers and ended up at Cal. It would seem like he's out of the mix right now, but I know his ability would make them different. And they've been playing younger guys as well, and just how a young guy can develop from one week to the next is scary sometimes. You just don't know. And that confidence factor is probably the biggest thing that they're trying to overcome right now, but it can happen if you allow it to, and we can't let that happen.
With the game film you've watched, what are you expecting from them defensively to throw at you this Saturday?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I think we are different, in mindset than some of the teams they've played. I know we're probably more similar, to the last 2 teams they've played. I guess you look at Montana and Weber State, because early on they played a bunch of odd front against the Fresno, South Dakota, and then the last couple of weeks they've been more 4 down, playing coverage. I think trying to be sound against both the run and the pass. So whether that means with our relative balance, if they'll try to load it up and stop the run, I would think that's where they would start, different than some of those early games. But I think we're still in the midst of certainly figuring that out, and I think it's a situation for us a little bit more comfortability than the last 2 weeks what we faced defensively. So I think we got to really concern ourselves with what can we do to get better offensively, and it's simple things. It's finishing the blocks. It's not leaving things out there in the pass game. It's protecting man. It's all those things. I think we can really take that step back and think that way, as opposed to being so concerned about this unique scheme.
I think historically people would characterize Bo Baldwin's offense as a little bit of an air raid principles, but to me it's always been a little bit more West Coast, a little bit more balanced than maybe people see on paper. Is that what you're seeing kind of in your preparation?
I think so. I think Coach Baldwin's a really good coach, and between his time at Eastern and Cal, probably more settled in from a personnel perspective than he currently is right now, especially with the quarterback carousel that they've had. But yeah, I don't think their numbers would indicate the balance he's probably trying to strike. And they've gotten behind in a few games, and that can really throw your numbers off quite a bit when you're chasing points. So I would expect them to try to be balanced, to try to develop a run game, not to be so one-sided, and we got to do what we can to try to make them as one-dimensional as possible.
You've talked about how kind of selfless Jahari has been in his filling in for RJ. Just how important has that been to him and him filling into that position?
Well,
kind of time.
Yeah, I know the one thing I really enjoy about him, he just wants to get on the field, whether that's been special teams, tailback, fullback, and when presented with this opportunity to really take on a role that's much more dirty work than he, he's practicing tailback, but really hadn't gotten any tailback reps. I think he jumped at it, and it's really been, you think, the last couple games in particular, with all of the different looks he's seen at fullback, it's been really on-the-job training, and he's playing hard, and he's allowed us to move forward and not have to skew personnel-wise, and really just scrap the fullback from our offense in RJ's absence. So he's allowed us to grow offensively, and I think for him it's been an opportunity to show that he's a good football player, I guess, and then his production on special teams, I think, has certainly added that as well. So, RJ will eventually get back on the field, and how that'll change Jahari's role, we'll have to see, but in the meantime, really appreciate what he's done for us.
Yeah, I mean, Jahari, is that a little bit more intellectual position, I guess, than maybe some people would realize, because especially for him having to learn that position?
No question. It's not just a guy that is willing to run into a wall over and over again. It's understanding angles, it's understanding things and reacting really fast. If your job is to block the C gap, and the defender who's the C gap defender could come from really 3 different angles, and you have to figure that out as fast as you can, moving as fast as you can. That's challenging. We haven't had him block on the perimeter much, but that adds a whole nother layer. The pass game aspect would add a whole nother layer. So, what he's been able to bite off in a short time, we think he's doing well, and I think he can continue to grow. So, at the very least, we'll have the depth necessary to keep moving forward.
Were you worried that you'd have to toss some of those fullback plays out when RJ first went down?
I think we could look at Derek Snell, Ryan Davis potentially to do some of that, but then that would be, I think, taken away from their development at tight end. So I wasn't worried that we'd have to completely scrap it, but a little concerned with where those reps would come from. And I think based on some of the things we did in the spring, we saw that Jahari had the potential. He just didn't line up back there a whole lot. So it kind of happened, like I said, on the fly. And that was the San Diego game, and then more and more the last couple of weeks we've utilized him there, and I think he's done quite well.
Ed McCaffrey mentioned that he was missing some key players, including some starters this last week because of COVID, and unvaccinated players. I just wanted to kind of hear from your guys' perspective where you are vaccination rate wise, and if that's even been an issue for backups.
It hasn't been an issue. We haven't missed anybody. Our number is really next to nothing. We do have a couple, but they're getting tested and they're dealing with the protocols. But we haven't had any issues whatsoever. The guys that have become, in any case, ill have tested negative. We've had some guys ill, but we haven't had any issues with COVID at this point. And I think it's in large part to the great amount of our guys responding. In particular, at the end of the summer when the Big Sky did kind of lay out the rules, and our guys worked through whether it was 1 or 2 doses through August, and now we're in a position where, I think there's still a concern, but the level of concern that I know that they're dealing with at places like Northern Colorado, we're nowhere near that.
Blackfoot Communications is committed to supporting Bozeman businesses. From intelligent network solutions like SD-WAN to fast and reliable fiber-based services, Blackfoot delivers innovative ways for your business to succeed. Blackfoot Communications. Connect to more.
Comment on the status of some of the backfield behind Isaiah and Elijah. Kind of, what do you hope to get from that next group? And I saw Lane get into the game this week. Kind of, is that important to have a little bit more depth there?
Yeah, and Lane is kind of the key to that depth. No question about it. A guy that we feel comfortable doing kind of that every down role, or being able to go out there on any down, whether that's running the football, protecting, catching the football. And he went down pretty early in that Wyoming game, and to not have him available for a couple weeks, it did stretch us a little bit. And I think to have him back, and I think he's pretty much back to full speed now, is a good thing, because really Jahari would have been our third tailback there for that early stretch, and now we've completely moved him to fullback. So, I think we feel good about those three guys. The balance yardage-wise between Isaiah and Elijah, and then both getting over 100 for the first time was big. I think carries-wise, Isaiah's still going to get not the bulk necessarily, but the heavier load. But to be able to get Elijah in there like we did, and really be able to kind of be a change of pace within drives, I thought that showed the best it had on Saturday, and it really, I think, to some degree caught them off guard at times, and now Lane can certainly figure it, I think, more and more as we go forward.
Brody, continuing to get those third down reps. Has he improved? What have you seen from his progress so far?
Yeah, he's really taken that role and ran with it. You look at a guy that was really raw in the spring, and he's young by college football standards as far as his experience. And I think our coaches did a great job of recognizing, hey, here's a guy, in particular if we get him a specialized role here in the fall, he could really take off with it, and he has. He's allowed us to move Amandre inside and really not lose a whole lot. And in fact, I think we've gained. You get a better pass rusher on the inside, and Brody's done a really consistent job on the outside. And I think down the road we anticipate his role will certainly grow. And whether that down the road is in the years to come or in the weeks and months to come, I don't know. But right now, he's really, he's doing a really good job for us. And I appreciate our coaches for identifying that kind of personnel grouping that we were able to throw out there on third down and really been able to cause some problems for quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think he had the pressure, or some of the main pressure on the first interception, and then obviously last week the strip sack. So.
Yeah, he's a young guy that from a small town in Montana that I think, I personally didn't recruit him, but he's one of those guys. When we walked in there, when they were working out in the South Dome in the spring, you said, okay, that's a guy that has to figure in what's his story, and you hear his story. He went to prep school and wasn't sure between basketball and football, but you knew, that's the type of athletic, developmental guy that we need to get from this state, and really appreciated his growth in the time that I've been here.
You showed a little bit of depth on defense, especially in the linebackers. Danny, you had a couple pretty big plays. What have you thought about him sticking in there and staying with the process and then getting to actually?
Yeah, it was big and it was intentional for Danny to get those reps because Nolan was doing such a good job backing both guys up, and Danny hadn't really got in there a whole lot in meaningful snaps. So to get him and Alex Johnson both some meaningful snaps the last couple weeks, and certainly more so on Saturday against Northern Colorado was big, because I think for both of them it's game reps, it's seeing it at game speed, it's having confidence in yourself. I mean, it's all those things where your experience and then the trust the coaches have in you can grow. And I think Danny really made some big leaps, and I think Alex has too the last couple weeks.
And you mentioned Alex. I mean, he came here as a pretty thin guy. You could tell he was athletic, but when I saw him in fall camp, all of a sudden takes this big jump, and he's been on the two deep consistently. So what kind of progress has he made this last?
Yeah, still a little too thin. Yeah. but progress for sure. Alex can really run, and I think he was one of those guys in the spring that missed enough time that his growth wasn't maybe evident in the spring, but fall camp and you take what he was able to do with Coach Herron this summer, it started to add up for him. Smart kid, hard worker that moves really well, and if we can continue to allow him and Danny those opportunities to get on the field and give Cal and Troy some relief, that's just going to make us a better football team as we move forward, not only this year but into the future.
And in that position group, what kind of leadership does Callahan bring?
I think stepping up more and more. We have enough guys on defense that he would probably defer to from a speaking perspective. He's not maybe the most outspoken guy, but I think he's a guy that everybody knows they can count on, and I think he's getting more and more comfortable, I guess, in his own skin of emerging as a leader. Whether that real vocal role has to really take hold this year or not, I'm not sure, but it certainly will in the very near future.
It's really good to see him get that interception and make an explosive play where he's always one that's just kind of consistently making tackles and giving that consistent production.
Yeah.
Giving that explosive play, I imagine.
No, that was a big play, early in that game to give us the ball at midfield. And he showed athleticism. I know he is known more to be a box guy. I think that's where his comfort level is. But, beyond the interception, he's made some plays this year where he's really had to run. He's worked real hard. I think, his athleticism certainly gets overshadowed by Troy. But I think Cal in his own right is a really good athlete that I think what you see week after week is just his growth, his comfort level, his confidence continuing to, rise. And, I think that's what we need as the season kind of moves on for sure.
You mentioned Jaden Smith was slowed down in fall camp. What did you mean by that, or specifically?
Well, he just missed some time.
Okay.
He just missed some time practice-wise. Probably missed a good week at least. So I think slowed down from a perspective. He had missed some time in the spring. He was one of those guys. You look at the 15 practice we had in the spring and the 25 we had leading in, I would say he probably was about 25 of those 40 practices. So just a little slower to go as far as not maybe grasping things so much, but just getting those opportunities to continue to show himself. That was the biggest thing. And leading into the Wyoming game, he hadn't practiced a whole lot leading into that game, so it's been a gradual build. And that was certainly his biggest day and his most opportunities. So appreciate his progress.
Coulter, do you have anything?
Yeah, hey, Coach, sorry I couldn't hear the questions on that side very well. So if by chance I ask you a question that is you repeating yourself, just tell me that, because I'm recording on my...
I'll give you a better answer than Belichick did last night when someone came and tried to ask him a repeat question.
Well, that's good. That's definitely good. I know you talked a little bit about Coach Baldwin and sort of his coaching prowess, but what do you think of the composition of his staff? So many guys that were at Easter before, mostly as players, some that were as coaches too. So guys that are familiar with the league, but maybe new to Cal Poly, what do you think of that dynamic?
Well, I think from Coach Baldwin's perspective, I get it. You're trying to transform a program, and not that Cal Poly hasn't done well. It's just you're trying to put your own stamp and really flip it upside down in a lot of ways. So to have, coaches that are familiar with how you want to do things, both schematically and probably just from a principle perspective, I certainly get it. And it's a lot of young, emerging coaches, and I think it's allowed, I'm sure, for him to be able to focus on the many tasks outside of the schemes and stuff that a head coach has.
You've coached in a couple leagues where the composition of the league makes sense because of the geographical similarities, I guess. I'm not trying to get you to say that the Big Sky doesn't make sense, but what do you think of the Big Sky's compositions, particularly when it comes to some of these affiliated schools like Cal Poly and UC Davis?
Well, I know those are decisions made long before I was here. I know, having played, Davis and Poly back in that stretch when I was at North Dakota State and we were all trying to find a home, along with Northern Colorado. I guess I see the rationale of adding to a league strength with numbers. But on the flip side, when you have schools that are just, members from an individual sport perspective, I do think that's a little more challenging. I know Hawaii was that way or is that way in the Mountain West. But I think they both, those two California schools in particular have rich traditions, and I see why that decision was made. And I know that Southern Utah moving in and out now, lessens the number by one. So, as you look at all the conference dynamics, the first thing I'm sure commissioners look at is just there's strength in numbers. I think we're in a good place with our numbers, and that's probably in large part because we have those schools as part of the league.
For a long time, two conferences were aligned based on institutional similarity, not just geographical location, but also sort of having something in common academically or in their quests. And it seems like it's got away from that largely. But do you feel like it's necessary for schools to be sort of like-minded in terms of conference affiliations?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, because you want a league that's made up of teams that have, I guess, similar desires, right? I mean, that's probably what you're saying. And I think from a sports perspective, I think if you have a league largely comprised of schools that are committed in a similar fashion, you're going to have a strong league. And that's probably the biggest challenge for, decision makers, commissioners to sort out, because that's hard to gauge. And I think what I've seen is we have a deep league, and that's in large part because I think the commitment is there at several institutions. I don't know that it's the same at every institution, and how schools prioritize their commitment to different sports. I can't say I've completely figured that out yet, but yeah, I think you want that. I think you want parity is not the right word. I just think you want, as a football coach, you want football to matter at the schools that you play against, and I think that's hard to put it all on that. But having schools that are aligned, in many ways, should be the desire of a league.
And last question for me. You talked about the physical conditioning of your team coming into the season. That seems to me like it's shown through a lot in these first 5 games. But when you get to the midst of the season, sort of hard to stay in that type of shape, I guess, or is it? I guess, how do you continue to maintain the level of physical conditioning you guys have had and continue to play well in the second half of games?
Well, you said it. You want to maintain it. You're not in position to grow it necessarily. We have our younger guys that are more in a developmental mode, guys that need to gain weight that aren't playing on Saturdays. But we hope our guys that are out there on Saturdays are maintaining in the weight room. And the way we practice, from a conditioning perspective, maintaining their conditioning level as well. And that's something that I know Coach Herron and his staff monitor very closely. And our conditioning has to be an ace in the hole for us, and I think it has been to this point, and that'll have to continue to be that way. So we get into the depth of November, we have to be the better conditioned team, and how you do that is just you continue to work. Just because you're in the middle of the season doesn't mean you shut down in the weight room, doesn't mean you practice less hard or less time for that matter. So we've continued to go at it, in particular, on our Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and I think it's a little different mode than maybe our guys were used to, but I think it's showing up where each Saturday at this point, I think we've been the better conditioned team.
All good? All right, thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.